Well, I've been reading the posthumously published works of Hemingway over the last year or so, maybe a little longer. The Garden of Eden, The Dangerous Summer, the works of his that were published in his later life or after his death. And one that really has caught my interest is True at First Light, principally because of that running theme of truth and fiction, the relationship between the writer and truth, and telling the truth and what is true. But everywhere in Hemingway, I find resonance with my personal philosophy, with courage in the face of death, and of course, just the style that we all love, that clear cutting prose, that clear cutting language that Hemingway uses. To talk about rhetoric for a minute, that just has an ethos. The very syntax, the very diction has an ethos. We trust the writer, I think. We trust that voice because it's so honest, it's so clear, and that shows. And that's also in Hemingway. He reflects on that as saying, in his writing process, he suggests to other writers, try to write one true sentence, right? Or something like this. I think that's in A Movable Feast. Write one true sentence, and that's how you start. Or maybe he's even giving himself advice. He's kind of talking about his own writing process, not to drain the wellspring, to leave some for the next day. But I was more interested now in this video. Sorry, this is more for my personal notes than anything, and just things I'm thinking about right now. If you're not interested in Hemingway, you don't have to watch this, of course. But I'm reading True at First Light, and there's a passage. I'm on page 25, and this is I'm not sure what edition this is. Really, it's Scribner who do all of the Hemingway works, 1999. I think it's the 100th anniversary of 1999 was the 100th anniversary of Hemingway's birth. But on page 25, there's this wonderful passage where you have your narrator talking with his wife about, and it's Hemingway, it's autobiographical, and his wife at the time, Mary. And he's talking about semi-autobiographical, part fiction, part reality. He's talking about childishness. And there's this wonderful passage here. There are mystical countries that are a part of one's childhood, those we remember and visit sometimes, and so on. If you go back to them, they're not there, right? You try to revisit a place. That's Heraclitus too, right? You can't step in the same river twice. It's always changing. You try to return to that childhood nostalgia, but they are as fine in the night as they ever were if you have the luck to dream of them. And he goes on, we lived on the small plain in the shade of the big thorn trees near the river at the edge of the swamp at the foot of the great mountain. We had such countries as that. He's really nostalgic for this time in Africa. We were no longer technically children, although in many ways I'm quite sure that we were. Childish has become a term of contempt, he's saying. Really, that inner childhood, that inner childishness, that dreaming, being in the mystical country, that's a honorable thing, a good thing. And then you have this dialogue, don't be childish, darling. And Hemingway says, I hope to Christ I am. Don't be childish yourself. I hope to Christ I am childish. He wants to be, he's saying this is not a term of contempt, that creativity, that playfulness, that mystical wandering is something very right. It's something very good. And Hemingway does not, Hemingway's very precise with his ethics and his morality, right? So this is pretty striking. It's pretty salient to see when Hemingway moralizes, he really means it, right? He really means it when he says something like this. I think that's how I read Hemingway. Anyways, you take him very seriously when he starts philosophizing, and those little bits between the action, between your plot development, you get those glimmers of where he speaks directly to you as a reader and tells you what he's thinking. And then just that next line, it is possible to be grateful that no one that you would willingly associate with would say, be mature, be well balanced, be well adjusted. And I love this because I just quoted Plato somewhere in something I was writing as, Plato writes something like, do not take, a temperate friend, choose the one who is insane, rather choose the intemperate friend, choose the mad companion. That's who you want to have in your life, is the person who's kind of sparking, full of creativity. So Hemingway is like echoing Plato here, I think, in this really wonderful way. I don't know if Hemingway read the ancient Greeks. He read Tolstoy in later life, the Russians. He read a lot of his fiction, that would have been contemporary with Hemingway. He was a savvy writer. He kept a watch on what other writers were doing. He was good friends with Scott Fitzgerald and of Great Gatsby fame and this sort of thing. I don't know if Hemingway read the ancient Greeks or not. I would have to look a little further there, but Hemingway writes again, it is possible to be grateful that no one that you would willingly associate with would say, be mature, be well balanced, be well adjusted. In other words, don't surround yourself with people who tell you to be mature, be well balanced, be well adjusted. Those are not good things for Hemingway here. That's not what you want in life. You don't need to be mature. You don't need to be well balanced. You don't need to be well adjusted. And so why am I interested in this? Because I'm writing about and focusing on the role of madness in Plato's Phaedrus and more broadly in Plato's thinking as a kind of antidote to Stoicism. I think that there's too much rigidity, too much order in contemporary, in this voice we hear from the contemporary self-help gurus who are trying to channel ancient philosophy and literary wisdom and philosophical wisdom. To me, it doesn't seem that excessive order and self-control are the ticket. They don't seem like the solution to a fulfilled, happy, invigorated, interesting, purposeful, meaningful life. Rather, it's something more like this that Hemingway is hinting at. It's something more like break the order. It's like challenge the status quo. It's something more like be mad. That's Plato's madness, right? Is be inspired, be creative, break down the walls, reinvent yourself, reinvent the world, imagine a better world. That's openness, that's creativity, that's the childlike mystical country here that Hemingway is channeling through this passage in True at First Light. And then this runs throughout the text, a major theme, playing with issues of identity, playing with issues of what is true and what is not true, and the illusions of reality. So there's something a little different than the ancient Greeks, if you like Hemingway, or even if you do not. Hemingway, of course, is problematic for a lot of modern readers because of his, what could we say, some very problematic ways of thought, some prejudices and sexism and things that don't sit well now with the modern reader. And so Hemingway is hard in that way, to look past some of the really blatant social, cultural, political, economic, racial issues that permeate his writing. And maybe it's not to We don't want to excuse Hemingway, but still there in his writing is so much that we can gather, so much wisdom that we can still, that still resonates with us. All right. Take care of yourselves. There's a little bit of something, a little something different, something interesting for you